American corruption isn't just about crimes. It's a circus of greed, ego, and unbelievable stunts. We're talking about mayors building backyard pyramids, senators freezing bribe money next to their chicken nuggets, and school officials hoarding lunchboxes like they're preparing for the end of days. Buckle in. This isn't your average lecture on politics. It's a wild ride through the scandals that prove when it comes to corruption, America doesn't just play the game, it rewrites the rulebook. 1. During the Cold War, the Pentagon managed to make a cup of coffee the most expensive brew on Earth. $7,600 for a single coffee maker. And no, it didn't pour gold-laced espresso. When Congress started asking questions, officials calmly explained it was part of a classified program. Right? Because apparently the Soviets were going to surrender if they tasted Pentagon-grade Java. You have to wonder, was the machine at least smart enough to deliver national secrets with the latte foam? 2. The 1950s Cultural Revolution scandal was proof that the US government knew how to play dirty, with a touch of jazz and oil paint. The State Department secretly bankrolled cultural exchange programs, using American artists, musicians, and writers as stealth propaganda agents. Their mission? Sell democracy with a smile and maybe a saxophone solo. While the world swooned over American cool, back home, politicians grinned. Turns out freedom can be marketed like a Broadway show. 3. Earl Long, brother of the infamous Huey Long, treated Louisiana's budget like his personal piggy bank. Among his greatest hits? Buying a racehorse with state funds and naming it Louisiana. Subtle, right? At least the taxpayers finally had a chance at winning. At the track, not in life. Earl's antics were so wild, you half expect to hear the legislature had a permanent bar cart rolling through. Forget policy. It was all cocktails and Kentucky Derby dreams. 4. In 1969, the Bureau of Indian Affairs pulled off one of the ugliest heists in U.S. history. Millions earmarked for Native American education and welfare vanished straight into the pockets of federal officials. The result? Schools without supplies, clinics without medicine, and tribal communities left in the dust. It's a bitter example of government theft disguised as administrative handling. If Robin Hood robbed the rich for the poor, these guys flipped the script, robbing the poor for their next yacht. 5. Bell, California, made headlines in 2011 not for its charm, but because its city manager pocketed almost $800,000 a year. His defense? The job is stressful. Sure, maybe the real stress was figuring out how to fit that paycheck into a wallet. As residents faced skyrocketing taxes, local officials were busy awarding themselves raises like they were handing out candy at a parade. Moral of the story? Sometimes the biggest robbers don't wear masks. They wear name tags and sit at City Hall. 6. The credit mobilier scandal of the 1870s was basically Congress' early attempt at corporate cosplay. Members were handed stock in a bogus construction company, and in exchange, they rubber-stamped ludicrous contracts for the Union Pacific Railroad. When the public found out, many lawmakers gave a collective shrug. Apparently, selling out was just another Tuesday. It's the kind of corruption so baked into the system that, when asked for accountability, they probably just billed taxpayers for the apology. 7. The Brooklyn Bridge is a marvel of engineering, but its real balancing act was keeping upright under a mountain of 1870s corruption. Contractors bribed officials to look the other way as they used cheap, substandard materials, pocketing the difference. Delays stacked up, costs ballooned, and at one point, they even tried using a cheaper kind of rope on a suspension bridge. Amazingly, the bridge still stands today, almost as if it's holding itself up out of sheer spite. It's a monument not just to human achievement, but to the fact that sometimes even corruption can't bring down a good idea. 8. The Works Progress Administration in the 1930s was meant to rescue the country from the Great Depression, but in some places it was more like the Works Pocket-Filling Administration. Supervisors padded payrolls with ghost employees, many of whom mysteriously shared the same last name. Coincidence or family reunion, nepotism became the real job creator, as uncles, cousins, and long-lost brothers collected paychecks without lifting a finger. Who knew that in the middle of historic unemployment, some folks were getting paid just for showing up on paper? 9. Only in New Jersey can a mayoral race turn into a prison yard campaign stop. In Camden's 2002 election, one candidate was busted mid-race for stealing campaign funds and decided to keep campaigning from jail. You almost admire the optimism. Spoiler, voters weren't exactly inspired by his cell block speeches, and unsurprisingly, he didn't win. But hey, his tough-on-crime platform probably hit differently once he was calling in statements from behind bars. You have to admit that's commitment. 10. Jimmy Walker, the 1920s mayor of New York City, was a walking, talking cocktail of charm, corruption, and sheer nerve. Accused of pocketing kickbacks from every corner, contractors, speakeasies, gambling joints, Walker responded with a grin and the unforgettable line, "I don't make a lot of money, but I spend a lot." At least he wasn't pretending to be frugal. Imagine today's politicians being that blunt. We'd probably throw a parade just for the honesty. 11. World War II was a time of sacrifice, patriotism, and for some companies, profit at any cost. Several factories bribed their way into military contracts, but one really went above and beyond, delivering cardboard boots to American troops. Because nothing says, "We support the troops," like shoes that disintegrate in the rain. While soldiers were storming beaches, these companies were storming bank accounts. Talk about marching to the beat of greed. 12. California politics hit peak absurdity in the early 2010s when a city council member spent $10,000 of taxpayer money on a pet psychic for a pig named Wilbur. Yes, Wilbur was the city mascot, and yes, he apparently had deep concerns about his role in government. While residents worried about potholes and crime, officials were busy consulting a psychic about Wilbur's stress levels. The only upside? For once, when pigs fly wasn't the most ridiculous part of the story. 13. Wall Street in the roaring 1920s wasn't just about champagne and jazz. It was a playground for some of history's most brazen insider trading schemes. A clique of powerful bankers manipulated stock prices, rigged interest rates, and cashed in on ordinary people's losses. When the dust settled, millions were wiped out, the public was devastated, and the masterminds? They walked free, cocktail glasses still in hand. It was less, "crime doesn't pay," and more, "crime pays best when you own the bank." 14. Only in Florida could you get a vampire-obsessed county commissioner who decides taxpayers should fund his dream of a bat-friendly courthouse. Claiming it was an eco-initiative, he installed special lighting to attract bats. Because nothing says fiscal responsibility like building Gotham City on a public budget. Critics were convinced the real goal wasn't helping nature, but setting the mood for his after-dark meetings. Honestly, why drain blood when you can just drain the county treasury? Somewhere, Count Dracula is jealous of this guy's hustle. 15. Kansas, in the 1930s, pulled off a political shakedown that makes modern scandals look almost polite. State officials demanded teachers donate a slice of their already modest paychecks to political campaigns, or risk losing their jobs. Imagine molding young minds by day, only to be strong-armed for cash by night. Apparently, educating the next generation wasn't considered enough civic duty. The only school lesson here? Even in a classroom, someone's always passing the hat. And it's not for a bake sale. 16. The payola scandal of the 1950s revealed that America's favorite radio hits weren't rising up the charts by talent alone. They were being shoved there with cold, hard cash. Record labels slipped bribes to DJs to guarantee airplay, turning top 40 radio into a glorified auction. While fans danced to the same 10 songs on repeat, few realized they were essentially listening to the sound of a checkbook at work. If you ever wondered why your parents can't stand that one overplayed oldie, well, now you know. 17. In the 1990s, the Department of Housing and Urban Development pulled off what might be called the real-life blueprint for federal failure. Billions were funneled to low-income housing developers, except the only thing these guys built was their own bank accounts. Neighborhoods stayed blighted, homes never materialized, and taxpayers were left paying for invisible projects. It was less urban development and more Magician's Disappearing Act. Poof, your money's gone. 18. Mayor William Hale Thompson of Chicago was basically the political love child of a circus and a crime drama. During Prohibition, he happily accepted bribes from bootleggers and gangsters, and once publicly threatened to punch the King of England. Sure, the newspapers loved the soundbite, but let's be honest. This was a guy trying to distract people from his bromance with Al Capone. When the mayor's office starts sounding like the plot of a Martin Scorsese film, you know democracy's in trouble. 19. The Chicago 7 trial in 1963 was supposed to be about civil rights and protest, but it also pulled back the curtain on a city so tangled in corruption it practically needed its own crime family crest. Investigations revealed that bribes were quietly shaping legal outcomes, with judges and officials pocketing cash to tilt trials. At one point, it was whispered that the entire justice system was practically outsourced to the mob. Imagine facing trial knowing Lady Justice just took a cash advance. 20. The 1950s. New York subway scandal was a masterclass in cutting corners, and then watching them crumble. City officials handed out bloated contracts to companies using shoddy materials, and the results were predictably catastrophic. Trains constantly breaking down, stations turning into swimming pools every time it rained, and commuters wondering if the city was testing an experimental underwater transit system. Who needs progress when you can have profit, right? 21. Arizona. Governor Fife Symington's fall from grace in the 1990s was a masterclass in political self-sabotage. Convicted of extortion and bank fraud, Symington's defense was a real gem. He claimed he simply didn't understand accounting. Right? Because when you're handling millions in public funds, basic math is apparently optional. Unsurprisingly, the judge wasn't buying it. Fun fact, pleading ignorance while sitting in the governor's chair is a bold move, one that tends to end with fewer handshakes and more handcuffs. 22. Prohibition was supposed to dry up America's booze, but some U.S. Coast Guard officers were more interested in refilling their wallets. Instead of stopping smugglers, they seized illegal liquor, then turned around and sold it right back to the bootleggers. Talk about running a closed-loop supply chain. While the public imagined brave coasties battling rum runners, some of them were busy becoming the nation's most efficient bartenders. Cheers to corruption with a nautical twist. 23. In Philadelphia during the 2010s, one state education official redefined the meaning of tech-savvy by spending millions on a so-called innovative learning program. The highlight? Over 1,000 tablets for a classroom of just 20 students. Apparently, the kids were expected to juggle 50 tablets each. Or maybe the extras went straight to the official's research department. Read, personal stash. It's a classic example of turning education funding into an unboxing video no one asked for. 24. Alaska. Senator Ted Stevens hit peak political obliviousness when he accepted over $250,000 worth of home upgrades from an oil company. Think fancy jacuzzi, shiny new deck, and a makeover worthy of a reality show. His defense? He didn't notice. Because, of course, most of us overlook a two-story deck appearing on the back of our house. It's almost impressive how little you have to pay attention to pocket that level of luxury and still say, wait, when did that get there? 25. Vice President Spiro Agnew's 1972 resignation was less House of Cards and more rookie crime gone viral. While governor of Maryland, Agnew took bribes the old-school way. Literal envelopes of cash handed to him in his office. Forget secret offshore accounts or wire transfers. This was bribery with all the subtlety of a pizza delivery. The fact that it got him all the way to the vice presidency before crashing down? That's the kind of political comedy you just can't make up. 26. In 1987, a Tennessee judge turned his courtroom into a full-blown marketplace. Criminal defendants who wanted lighter sentences just had to pay up. And yes, the judge kept a detailed ledger of every bribe. Nothing says organized corruption like balancing the scales of justice with accounting precision. You almost want to applaud the paperwork discipline until you remember that innocent people were stuck facing a system where cash mattered more than the law. 27. Louisiana. Senator William Jefferson became a living punchline when investigators found $90,000 in cash crammed into frozen food containers in his freezer. That's right. While most people store chicken nuggets and peas, Jefferson was chilling his bribes. Forget stocks, bonds, or gold. Apparently, the smart money's been in frozen assets all along. Somewhere, even the most crooked Wall Street broker is shaking his head and saying, "That's creative." 28. In the 1980s, Operation Greylord ripped the mask off Chicago's legal system and revealed, well, a cash register. Judges, lawyers, and clerks were caught taking bribes like it was a family business. One judge even set a neat little price list: $10,000 per felony acquittal. Imagine justice as a menu item. "I'll take the felony dismissal, medium rare, please." Turns out Lady Justice wasn't just blind. She was reaching for a fat envelope under the table. 29. Los Angeles officials in 2014 decided that governing a city of millions just wasn't glamorous enough. So they dipped into public funds to redecorate their offices in jaw-dropping style. The centerpiece? A $20,000 rug made of exotic animal hides. Because obviously the real key to efficient leadership is a carpet that screams, "I'm better than you." Who knew taxpayers were footing the bill for LA's personal episode of Pimp My Office? 30. The early 1900s. Sugar Trust scandal was a masterclass in sticky-fingered corruption. Customs officials were bribed to underweigh sugar imports, cheating the government out of millions. It was basically sweetheart deals taken to a whole new level. And no, nobody got a cavity filling, but the public sure got a bitter aftertaste. If you ever thought sugar only rotted teeth, turns out it can rot an entire tax system. 31. William A. Clark, Montana's legendary copper baron, didn't just dabble in corruption. He wore it like a badge of honor. In the early 1900s, he blatantly bribed state legislators to grab himself a U.S. Senate seat. When called out, he coolly remarked, "I never bought a man who wasn't for sale." Say what you will about the guy, but at least he skipped the PR spin and went straight for the Honesty Award, a rare kind of shameless. 32. Everyone remembers the Watergate break-in, but the real show behind the scenes was Nixon's administration treating government agencies like their own sabotage squad. Plans to plant fake news stories, smear campaigns, and political dirty tricks ran so deep it made reality TV look like a Sunday picnic. If you thought today's politics were wild, Watergate was the original scandal with bonus features no one wanted, except maybe late-night comedians. 33. Oklahoma Governor David Hall's political downfall in the 1950s wasn't subtle. Caught in a bribery scheme over shady insurance deals, Hall's defense was legendary. He claimed it was all a setup by sore losers. Apparently, the jury wasn't buying the underdog story, and Hall proudly became the first Oklahoma governor to swap the statehouse for a prison cell. Nothing like making history in all the wrong ways. 34. The 1950s IRS scandal gave a whole new meaning to tax relief. Dozens of IRS agents were busted for accepting bribes to make people's tax debts magically disappear. Picture it. You owe the government thousands, but a quiet handshake later, poof, problem solved. Who needs a tax accountant when you can have your own personal IRS fixer? Let's just say April 15th felt a lot less stressful for the well-connected. 35. In the 2010s, Opelika, Florida, earned a reputation so bad the FBI casually dubbed it Corruption City. Officials weren't just bending rules. They were shaking down residents for bribes just to turn their water back on. Yes, you heard that right. Want a glass of water or a working shower? Better slip an envelope under the table. In a place where basic utilities became a pay-to-play game, the local government practically made extortion part of the plumbing system. 36. The 1930s Federal Reserve Bank of New York scandal was a golden opportunity for corruption, literally. A group of elite bankers quietly colluded with foreign governments to manipulate gold prices, all while the public stayed blissfully unaware. To this day, some believe mountains of gold quietly disappeared, with taxpayers footing the invisible bill. If you think modern finance is shady, remember, these guys were running international heists in pinstripe suits long before Wall Street had hashtags. 37. Arizona in the mid-2000s gave us a mayor who wasn't just eccentric, he was pharaoh-level delusional. Convinced he was the reincarnation of an ancient Egyptian ruler, the man poured city funds into building a scale replica of the Sphinx in his backyard. He called it a cultural landmark. Residents called it our taxes buried in the sand. You almost have to admire the creativity. If only it hadn't come with a side of financial collapse. 38. The 1970s weren't just about disco and bell-bottoms. They were also the decade when corrupt defense contractors turned U.S. military tech into a global yard sale. Advanced weaponry, from precision missiles to fighter jets, was sold off to foreign governments at bargain bin prices, with barely a glance at the customer list. For these contractors, loyalty stopped at the paycheck. Who cared if America's enemies got a discount as long as the money rolled in? 39. Only in Texas could a state senator gamble his political career on a Beanie Baby. In the 1990s, this senator spent campaign funds on a rare Princess Diana bear, convinced it was an investment goldmine. Spoiler, it wasn't. He lost the election, and the bear, now worth about $3, became the office mascot, a tragic, plushy symbol of both his political and financial downfall. Sometimes the real collector's item is the embarrassment you picked up along the way. 40. The Flint water crisis of the 2010s wasn't your typical bribery scheme. It was corruption in its rawest, most callous form. Government officials switched the city's water supply to cut costs, ignoring clear warnings about lead contamination. The result? Thousands poisoned, a public health disaster, and a permanent stain on Michigan's reputation. This wasn't just negligence. It was the kind of decision where human lives were weighed and lost against a bottom line. 41. In the 1990s, the U.S. military became an accidental arms dealer when corrupt insiders sold surplus equipment, yes, including tanks and fighter jets, to private contractors for pennies on the dollar. With the right connections, you could stockpile heavy weaponry cheaper than buying a used minivan. It was like a garage sale from hell where, instead of old lawn chairs, you left with a Humvee and a howitzer. Who needs eBay when the Pentagon is your wholesaler? 42. In the early 2000s, Detroit's mayor Kwame Kilpatrick became the poster child for what happens when power goes straight to someone's head and wallet. Using public funds, Kilpatrick threw wild parties, bought luxury cars, and even quietly settled a whistleblower lawsuit. But the real kicker? It all unraveled thanks to text messages he never thought would see daylight. Pro tip for corrupt officials everywhere: if you're going to loot the city, maybe don't document it like you're writing a soap opera script. 43. The 1876 presidential election was so messy, Congress decided the best way forward was to sell the White House. A backroom deal handed the presidency to Rutherford B. Hayes in exchange for ending Reconstruction. Forget ballots and debates. This was democracy with a price tag. It's one of those moments in U.S. history where you almost expect lawmakers to have thrown in a free toaster just to sweeten the deal. 44. The 2005 CoinGate scandal in Ohio proved that even rare coins aren't safe from corruption. State funds were invested with a politically connected coin dealer who then misplaced millions worth of shiny treasure. When the coins mysteriously vanished, so did the public's trust. It's the kind of heist that sounds like a quirky movie plot, except taxpayers weren't laughing when the credits rolled and the vault was empty. 45. The Star Route scandal of the late 1800s showed that even the mail wasn't safe from American greed. Postal officials teamed up with contractors to wildly inflate delivery costs, draining millions from the public purse. One senator famously called it a new level of creative theft. You have to admire the ambition. Why settle for robbing banks when you can rob post offices and have the government thank you with a contract? 46. Only in California could a school superintendent justify blowing school supply funds on vintage lunchboxes. Claiming they were educational artifacts, he amassed a collection of Superman and Star Wars lunchboxes. For his office, not a museum. Meanwhile, classrooms went without basics. When the truth came out, his career went the way of a cafeteria mystery meat. Straight to the trash. 47. In 2014, a scandal rocked New York prisons when guards were caught smuggling contraband inside, including cell phones, drugs, and steak dinners. Because why stop at cigarettes when you can run a full Michelin-starred operation behind bars? Apparently, some inmates weren't just serving time. They were enjoying 5-star room service. 48. In small-town Pennsylvania, the mayor's love for competitive eating took a juicy turn when he used city funds to sponsor an annual hot dog eating contest. On paper, it was all about boosting tourism. In reality, the mayor conveniently owned the local hot dog factory, and the contest just happened to launch his Mayor's Choice brand. Forget the contestants, the real winner was his profit margin. 49. Illinois. Governor Rod Blagojevich turned political corruption into performance art in 2008 when he was caught trying to sell Barack Obama's vacated Senate seat. His now legendary quote, "I've got this thing and it's expletive golden." And just like that, Blagojevich became a national punchline and a cautionary tale with matching golden handcuffs. So, which scandal blew your mind the most, or made you laugh in sheer disbelief? Drop it in the comments because honestly, I need to know which one made you yell at your screen. And hey, if you're into stories that make you question reality and your government, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell. Because trust me, we've only scratched the surface of America's greatest hits. Let's see if we can break the algorithm harder than these guys broke public trust.